Good morning and welcome to Newsmakers. After more than 2 years of claims and counterclaims, charges and countercharges, Hamilton County voters will finally have the opportunity to cast a vote about where they want a new stadium for the Cincinnati Reds. On the ballot, it is called Issue 11. Although we have done tons of Newsmakers related to this issue, I thought it was important to do one more before the election. For people who have just moved here, who can't keep the details straight, let's do a quick overview. For supporters of a stadium on the Riverfront, including the Reds, a majority of the county commissioners, Downtown Cincinnati, Inc., and the Chamber of Commerce, the only site available is what is called Baseball on Main by its supporters and the Wedge by its detractors. A new Riverfront stadium will use this publicly owned parking lot plus land cleared by the narrowing of Fort Washington Way and the partial demolition of Synergy Field during construction while the Reds continue to play there. Broadway Commons on the northeast edge of the central business district would be built on this parking lot, which the owner, Robert Chavez, has offered the county for $26 million. Broadway supporters, who include Cincinnati City Council and almost all the local planning boards, argue that the site is woven into the existing streetscape that will feature views of Mount Adams and stimulate the development of that end of downtown and the nearby over-the-Rhine area. The goal of this morning is to focus on the pros and cons of both of the sites, not on the other issue involved here. We dealt, at least in part, with the governmental implications of the charter amendment several weeks ago. To discuss the siting issue, I am very happy to be joined by the principal proponents of each position. John Schneider, a local developer who has championed the Riverfront stadium idea for years, represents the campaign organization put together for this election called Moving Greater Cincinnati to Get Forward. Jim Tarbell has led the fight for Broadway Commons from the beginning. He is also a downtown restaurateur, that's a politically correct 20th century way of saying saloon keeper, and a member of the Cincinnati City Council. John, Jim, welcome back. As I've told you, and I want to make clear, we're not going off into theoretical areas. We're going to try to stay focused. Everybody's talked about this a lot, so let's try to stay focused in a way that is helpful to the voters to make a decision. John, one of the charges about Baseball on Main is that there simply isn't enough room squeezed in between the Coliseum, and which is now called the Crown, and Synergy Field, and you're going to have to do some impossible things that are going to spend a lot of money, cost a lot of extra money. What do you say about that, and how much will this cost?
Well, if you look at it today, you could think that. What most people don't understand is that when Fort Washington Way is narrowed, our city will gain 15 acres of land that we don't have now. It is a difficult site to construct, but the architects, HOK, and the contractor who built Riverfront Stadium now, Synergy Field, have said they've done more difficult projects. The cost premium associated with the construction of that site ranges from $10 to $14 million over and above what it would cost to build, say, in a cornfield or at the Chavez site, for that matter.
And why does it cost the extra 10 to 14?
They have to do some selective. We'll take out 6,000 seats in left field. I think it's great that fans will see the stadium coming up right next to where they are now. Then Synergy would be torn down. We'll take off part of the parking deck. The staging materials is a little tight right there. But what people need to remember is when this facility is finished, Synergy Field goes away and leaves a park which is a half-mile wide at the river's edge between the Reds and the Bengals. It is going to be a beautiful postcard of our city.
Jim, do you think it's only 10 to 14 million?
No.
What do you think it is?
I just think what the commissioners think it is. You know, the Hamilton County Commission is on record. Huber, Hunt, and Nichols, who helped build it the first time and are online now to build it the second time, whatever it goes, along with HOK, have said that the difference between Broadway and the Riverfront, not counting the land costs, is $60 million. That was reaffirmed in May of 1998. It's on the desk in the commissioner's office right now.
So you see these numbers differently, and of course numbers are always something we can argue about until we get into it. And I'd like to point out, engineering studies have not been really completed on either of these sites. We do not have construction drawings. We don't know the exact figure.
Not really true. Fort Washington Way gives us a wealth of information about the soil conditions and the constructability of that end of the riverfront. By the way, I was wrong. This is a county document right here, and for the selective demolition, the increased cost, logistical restrictions, the interim accommodations, it is it is estimated at $6 to $13 million. Okay, this is a county document.
Okay. We can argue this till we're blue in the face, and we see here on the screen now how during the construction period, part of Synergy Field will have to be torn down in order to do that. Okay. Very honestly, isn't the best site on the riverfront, now that the Crown can't be bought, which is the original expectation, now that the stadiums have to be apart, isn't the best site the Synergy Field site? Wouldn't the best thing for the Cincinnati Reds to go away for 2 years, play in Columbus, and come back?
Well, I don't think you could do that. I'd worry about their fan base. But what's really important is the idea of extending the Main Street to the river and having it's a good walkable street right now that's very important. Synergy Field's in the wrong place. The park board planners will tell you that if Synergy Field stays, the 34-acre park that they'd like to develop isn't worth doing. There's just not enough land.
Jim, you know, everybody focuses on the riverfront side as not having enough space and being the wedge. Broadway Commons isn't, according to the opponents, isn't the perfect site either. For example, if you take the Coors Field footprint and you lay it on Broadway Commons, it really takes more than Broadway Commons. Here we see a street map of Broadway Commons up on the screen, but also, you know, there's another map shows the Coors Field that we're going to show in just a minute. What do you say to that?
I say trust the professionals. From the beginning, I've said trust the professionals, the people that we've hired to give us advice, which includes the County Planning Commission, the City Planning Commission, UDA, HOK, which is now the county's architect of record, and Huber Hunt and Nichols, they're consultants of record. They've said it fits on Broadway. That's as far as I need to go. Somebody with special interest is going to come forward and find some other way to say it doesn't work. But, you know, I take the county's consultant's word for it. And as far as the riverfront's concerned, you know, would you prefer to talk to me like this, you know, or would you prefer to talk to me like this? This is what you get when you put a big thing like the ballpark on the river next to the Roebling Bridge, and this is what you get if you take it off of the river and put it at Broadway.
Okay, here's a lot of people have argued, though, that the most valuable piece of property in the region, not just in the city of Cincinnati, but in the region, is the Cincinnati Riverfront.
Correct.
It's third the size of the whole downtown. And to take, I mean, let's face it, the Bengals has very little economic impact, 10 days a year at best, you know. And if you take the Reds, that draws lots of people, and you take them away from the riverfront, what do you got left for the riverfront, and what do you got left? What are the likelihood of things like the Underground Railroad Freedom Center or other development ever occurring there if, in fact, you take the Reds away from there?
What's the likelihood of the Freedom Center, which is about like this, when you put it between these two big monsters, surviving? How many people realistically do you think on their way to the football game or baseball game are going to be going to the Freedom Center? Forget it. Put something on the riverfront that complements the Freedom Center, like Fort Washington, and you as an historian ought to respect that, appreciate that, or, you know, parks, recreation, and other museum activities, and maybe housing eventually. And now you've got people that are there for the same reasons, for compatible reasons. If you have housing there, you've got people there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, that come back into town and patronize the businesses and the restaurants and the entertainment downtown on a regular basis.
John, can we afford to not build on the riverfront?
No. Well, the problem with the riverfront is valuable land that happens to flood. The way that we need to develop our riverfront is to use the things brought to the table by the teams, the parking budget, $100 million, to, when we narrow Fort Washington Way, to build up the land and put it above the flood level and extend 8 blocks of our city out that then become buildable sites. If that's not done, the riverfront will be surface parking for the Bengals, and that's it.
Let me take a look. We have a map that shows the distances from Fountain Square to these various sites and also to the hotel, because one of the charges has been that, oh gee, Broadway Commons is so far away, and secondly, and by the way, we redid this map based on our maps, not on the baseball on Main map, which makes it look a lot farther away. And secondly, in relationship to the hotels, which are clustered around the convention center. Now, Jim, in fact, Broadway Commons is farther away from Fountain Square, and psychologically, this is a small city. when we were going to develop the Aronoff, everybody said we can't put it more than 2 blocks from Fountain Square. Nobody will go there. Nobody will walk there. It is farther away. How do you answer that?
It's not much farther away. And it's also on a flat plane. You know, it's not up and down a hill going from 4th Street to 3rd Street and across the expressway. There's nothing but tightly woven street grid between Fountain Square and Broadway Commons. It's a very nice walk, and you go through Aronoff and the backstage on the way.
What about parking? And this is a real issue because, as John just brought up, parking on the riverfront is the key to everything else on the riverfront as the current vision exists. What do you do about parking up there?
Well, first of all, these folks make up their figures as they go along. They're changing every day. John said when he sat down here, he said they're developing new strategies every day.
Wow.
Well, we've had the same strategy for 2 years, in some cases for some of us about 7 years. There's been total consistency as far as Broadway is concerned, and yet the
What about
riverfront-
parking? What about parking?
The parking has always been there just the way the experts have said it's there. And
Where?
between Fountain Square and Broadway, you've got 13,000 parking spaces. That's what UDA said when they came, and we paid them $500,000 to study it. It's been reinforced by private parking experts as recently as a couple months ago. And in addition to that, you're going to have in excess of 3,000 new spaces built on the site by contract with the Reds wherever they go. So you're going to reinforce what's the nice thing, the wonderful thing that's always hit by others opposed to Broadway in favor of the wedge is that it's spread out. If you had it to do over again, if you wanted it that way, you couldn't do any better because it's spread out a half-mile radius from the entrance to Broadway, so you have people walking through their town, coming and going to the game, which is what you want.
John, one of the things that you've raised about all of this is access.
Right.
What about the access question? One, to the Broadway, and then we'll let Jim respond. And two, now that Fort Washington Way's done, and there's not the exits off Fort Washington Way anymore, future access to the riverfront, not what we've always known, but future access. What about that?
Fort Washington Way has been extensively modeled. Before that project could go forward, it had to be modeled for both the Reds and the Bengals. All of the freeways in the region converge at Fort Washington Way. All of our future light rail assets in the region, which I'm very interested in, will converge at Fort Washington Way. The point is also with you contact the riverfront 2 blocks south of Fountain Square at the new 3rd Street. You're in the riverfront zone. Okay, you begin to attack them. There are 23 times as many hotel rooms within 6 blocks of Baseball Main as there are at Broadway Commons. That's very
Well, that
important.
depends on where you draw the radius. You say 6 blocks. I mean, you can
I
draw
say-
the radius any way you want.
I say a 6-block walk as a person walks. 23 times as many. That's very important for the Reds, who have 55% of their weekend fans coming from outside the region. It is a major problem. We need to reinforce our hotel court. Access at Fort Washington Way, people are not going to believe how convenient it is. It goes from an F-rated federal system to a B-rated federal system.
Jim, we're almost out of time. What about access only now, not
Well,
parking?
we've cut off all the ramps for Fort Washington Way.
What about access to Broadway, though? How are we going to get there?
Well,
One exit of
Broadway has 6 ways in, 6 ways out. It's Reading Road, Central Parkway, Broadway, Court Street, Gilbert Avenue, and I-71. And that's part of the beauty of it. It's got 6 ways in and 6 ways out. Nobody's going to all go in the same way and out the same way. You can go west, you can go north, you can go south, you can go east. And while it may not be all that clear immediately, over time people figure out what's the best way for them to come and go, and you're still, bottom line, you're still on the expressway.
A fan going to Broadway Commons from I-75, north or south, will pass through 10 or 18 traffic lights to get there. 10 or 18 traffic lights. There will be, for people who are concerned about air quality in this region, you're looking at 18,000 cars stuck in traffic before and after games.
Okay.
It is a problem.
All right, we're out of time, and luckily the vote's just less than a month away, so this will be over, maybe. So thank you for being here, and we'll talk to you after the vote probably. Stay tuned. After the break, we'll take up a related issue. Should council be banned from taxing entertainment tickets to raise the $100 million it promised the Cincinnati Public Schools when the stadium tax was passed? Welcome back. Issue 12, an amendment to the charter of the City of Cincinnati, is popularly referred to as the Cap the Ticket Tax Amendment. In 1995, when voters were asked to approve an increased half-cent sales tax to build 2 new sports stadiums for the Reds and Bengals, Cincinnati City Council promised to donate $5 million a year for 20 years to the city's schools to help them float bonds to improve their decaying buildings. Ever since the sales tax passed, Council has promised, proposed, backed away from, and stabbed each other in the back, but failed to agree on a plan to raise the money. Several plans have proposed raising the current city ticket tax for sporting and entertainment events. The sports teams, especially the Bengals, and the entertainment promoters have responded by getting this proposal on the ballot as Issue 12, officially titled the Charter Amendment Limiting the Amount of Admissions Tax. It reads in part, "The council shall not impose a tax on admissions at a rate in excess of 3% without an affirmative vote of the electorate amending this section." To discuss this issue, I am now joined by two people. Chip Hart, the chair of the Cap the Ticket Tax movement and the president of Hart Productions, and the Reverend Duane Holm, the director of MARC, the Metropolitan Area Religious Coalition of Churches. MARC, which represents 15 local Christian, Jewish, and Islamic ministerial bodies, has taken an official position in opposition to Issue 12. Thank you for joining me on Newsmakers.
Good being with you.
Dan, glad to be with you.
Chip, that was the brief form, and that's what the ballot language says.
Right.
Why? Why are you doing this? And you represent Hart Productions, and you do a lot of things at the convention center and all of that. Why are you opposed to this?
That's correct. We are subject to an admissions tax for for-profit events at the convention center. And of course, we're not alone as to those that are impacted by that. We're opposed to it because we believe the voters should have a say in how their taxes are raised, and by being given a compelling reason to raise those taxes and what they're to be used for. So we believe that it's the voters having a say in raising those taxes.
Duane, is this wrong for the city council to hike the ticket tax and not give voters a say in this?
Well, Issue 12 is an effort by the Bengals and the entertainment industry to prohibit City Council from ever increasing their taxes for any purpose again. And we oppose it for a number of reasons, but most importantly, city charters were not meant for granting tax exemptions. And it really just isn't right for a special interest group to use the financial clout that they have to mount a campaign to amend the city charter, the constitution of the city, to grant themselves a tax exemption.
Chip, you know, we don't have pure democracy. We have representative government. And in fact, you know, we elect people, in this case a council, to make certain types of decisions, and traditionally to make this type of decision. Why take that away from them?
Well, when you look at other tax issues or taxation opportunities, the majority of tax issues have to go before the electorate.
Well, primarily schools have to go before the electorate.
But there are other levies, as we will certainly see on the ballot. We believe this to be essentially a loophole. The only other tax besides ours that we're aware of that can be raised by the city or the county would be the hotel or the bed tax. And we don't look at this as an exemption. What this means is that if we are successful, that council or any other group, if given a compelling reason to raise the tax, can go back to the electorate in the future to raise this tax. So it's not a permanent
But
exemption.
it significantly raises the bar and how you can do that.
Yes, it does, but it also causes government to give a compelling reason as to why to raise those taxes.
Duane, is there a compelling reason let me get clear. Is Mark opposed to this for the sort of governmental reasons you just stated, or is there another component that you believe that this tax needs to be raised because you believe that the city has to move on with supporting the schools?
Our initial concern was with the schools. And I think several things haven't been understood. The schools would have suffered from the stadiums in that they would have lost the property tax from the property that was demolished, and the state law had been changed so they would not get property taxes on the new stadium. So they were going to be harmed by this, and that's why the city and the county, in order to get a favorable vote on the stadiums, sweetened the pot with $5 million a year for 20 years. The county got the sales tax. It's very easy for them to make good on their commitment. The city got no new revenue, and so what we've been concerned is either they're going to have to find an additional revenue source, or they're going to have to cannibalize existing programs within the city budget in order to make good on this payment. We don't want to see the children get hurt in this.
I'm aware of time.
Well,
Chip,
and-
how do
and-
you propose the city should meet its promise?
First of all, we are 100% in favor of the schools, and we support them through our own
That's easy,
taxes
but how,
and so
how,
forth.
how would you
We
suggest the city
we
do this?
propose that the city, through the budget surplus it have, which it's now stands at somewhere around $200 million, fulfill that commitment to the school, which has been pre-existing for over 2 years now. We're seeing other programs being funded with that surplus, yet the schools are being ignored when the money is currently available.
Isn't it true, though, that this is a 20-year commitment? Yes,
That's correct.
times are good now, but when you look at 20 years, times will be also bad. So this is a structural question, right?
Sure, but we still feel that the city should come forward and make good on their commitment, get that started now. There is no need to raise any taxes to do so. And I think once they build that into the loop of future funding, and we do have the budget surplus now, that they should be able to fulfill that commitment on a regular basis.
What's happened is that every time City Council has come up with anything that remotely suggested a ticket tax, the Bengals and the entertainment industry have said, if you put the ticket tax on, we will go and repeal it. Now, rather than just repeal a ticket tax that City Council has voted, they've taken a preemptive strike and tried to put ticket tax off limits forever for any purposes.
I got to ask, there is a logical question here, is if this other tax was passed in order to build these 2 new stadiums, why shouldn't the people who use those stadiums and other facilities, playgoers, people who visit your shows at the convention center, why shouldn't they pay a little bit more? We already pay a ticket tax. It's not no ticket tax or some ticket tax. It's just a little bit of increase. Why shouldn't we pay that?
Because we're already paying a ticket tax. There's no reason that current 3% can't be marked for the public schools as it stands. We're generating a couple $1 million a year in admission taxes, and I would like to point out that this is not a special interest group. This is a very broad interest group because it does include ourselves, Taft Theater, Santangelo, golf courses, movie theaters.
But it
and a
is
whole
it is
host
the
of
sports
events.
and it is sports entertainment.
Yeah, I
I'm,
think
But
I'm only
that-
30. I only got 30 seconds left. Dwayne?
I think we're selling ticket buyers short on this, that we're talking about 1 1/4 cent additional increase. I think a lot of ticket buyers are quite willing to support schools. They're quite willing to support neighborhoods. They would not like to see themselves be used as a way of granting a special tax exemption to the entertainment industry.
Thank you for being here. Obviously, we didn't explore this completely, but at least we got it out on the table. And thank you for making Newsmakers a part of your Sunday morning. In the midst of the campaign season, this is the best place to hear the candidates and the campaign operatives explain in depth what's at stake on November 3rd. Have a good week.